Dad for having me, wife and children for existing, Dr. Ian, my professor, faculty advisor, my faculty advisor, Professor Julius, who's on a plane somewhere right now and said I would be all right, don't worry about it. Let's get it. So good afternoon. I want to ask this question. Do we set our children up as suckers when we teach them of justice in a profoundly unjust society? For clarity, I see justice as doing right because it's right. Avoiding normative arguments of what is right, my discussion here is part of a larger body of research that contends justice and education are indivisible. I will frame that discussion today against the backdrop of the United States of America, questioning racial asymmetries found in any cursory look at its history. As the example of my profoundly unjust society, the U.S. is unjust precisely because it prospers from a history of racist actions, building itself through the genocide of its indigenous peoples, the exploitation of Africans and Black Americans through slavery, and subsequent discriminatory laws and the racialization of the American citizen as white, Anglo-Saxon, and Protestant. Kind of moved away from the abstract. The Philosophy for Children in the Borderlands program, located in the El Paso Ciudad Juarez region, functions in the spirit of principles antithetical to the racist principles the U.S. was founded on. Operating in a region contending with its own history of racism, questions about justice are inevitable from the primarily Mexican and Mexican-American students of the program. In describing its purpose, Dr. Amy Reed Sandoval, the program's director, finds the staff and students, quote, work together toward the shared goal of enabling young people to raise and explore the philosophical questions that are most meaningful to them, unquote. In exploring these philosophical questions, staff and children use a dialectic, an approach promoted by the philosopher Paulo Freire. In simplest terms, a dialectic is a method of discussion between two opposing viewpoints, a thesis and antithesis, to create an outcome, a synthesis. In Pedagogy of the Oppressed, Freire endorses a dialectic based on two factors. First, a nuanced critical awakening occurring from dialogue between oppressed and oppressor. His conscientização. It's a tough one. The second, an understanding of what constitutes the dialectic, a transformation resulting from praxis. Freire defines praxis as, quote, reflection and action directed at the structures to be transformed, unquote. In the case of the Philosophy for Children program, praxis results from the dialectic between teacher and student, transforming local social norms through a discussion originating from the space created between teacher and student. This is a key move, as questions on subject matter emerge through cooperation rather than from a ham-handed transmission of non-contextual data. This transformation is born of a critical awakening and empowers children to become partners in their own education. At the same time, it is revolutionary, shifting education from its current banking method, where a teacher deposits so much knowledge as social capital into her student, to a problem-posing method, engineering dialectic through dialogue, enabling a strong student-teacher bond. Because the dialectic treats both teacher and student equally, Freire's critical pedagogy creates cooperation and unity. In turn, these cooperative and united partnerships are critical to any society based on principles of justice that extend to all citizens at all times. A criteria for one such society is laid out by John Rawls in A Theory of Justice. For Rawls, an ideal society demands those who benefit most from society do so without negatively affecting those who benefit least. In other words, those at the top benefit from society only when those at the bottom do not suffer as a result. Risking oversimplification, this is the heart of justice as fairness, and a crux for how I interpret social justice. Each participant in a society should expect a modicum of fairness regardless of race or class, rather than a chance for fairness affected by something as random as being born white or rich in the United States. The Philosophy for Children program is in a position to promote justice as fairness. In fact, Dr. Reed Sandoval says, quote, there is something rather Rawlsian about the ways in which those dialogues transpire. The idea is that children and youth are trying to discover what justice is and what justice should be through philosophical dialogue, unquote. In discovering justice through a philosophical dialogue, the Philosophy for Children program empowers both student and teacher to produce a collaborative outcome rather than deriving an outcome from socially unjust norms. Simply put, students learn of their own worth and are treated as equals in their education, a radical move from a system perpetuating racial and social injustices to a revolutionary action that shakes up a profoundly unjust society. I argue for revolutionary action based on the following statement. In a democratic society, education is a foundation, instilling democratic principles needed to strengthen and continue that society. Therefore, if those democratic principles are based on values like justice, then education should focus on those principles. But the current aims of education avoid teaching just principles. Conversely, the current education system undermines students through a distortion of justice that favors ideals antithetical to just principles. What is good is more important than what is right. My argument for programs like Philosophy for Children in the Borderlands lies in their revolutionary stance in the face of an education system perpetuating a focus on what is good. Of course, there are dangers to any revolution. So what's the big deal with turning children into suckers? Professor Shauna Schifrin presents a compelling argument against the telling of the Santa Claus story as truth. It follows that if we as parents believe the Santa Claus story is false, and we tell our children the Santa Claus story is true, we lie to our children. Without going into why lying is wrong, we should not have to lie to our children. And though this may be an innocuous lie, the potential to cause great damage exists. Not only can this be a devastating lie to a child, this devastating lie is told to them by the people they trust most, making these kids suckers. Imagine instead of the Santa Claus story, we tell the justice story. That justice as fairness goes for all in a society, no matter their race. That justice as fairness is a social good and everyone should be just to one another. That as long as we abide by just principles, we are entitled to the same rights as everyone else. What happens when our children learn of American slavery or of manifest destiny? Of Jim Crow laws, race-based drug policies, and mass incarceration, or that prior to 1965, citizenship for immigrants to the United States was contingent on how white they were. Children will realize the justice instilled in them as children was a lie, as phony as a magical time-traveling, gift-giving fat man in a red suit. And that justice is not only unfair, it is purposefully kept unfair by an oppressor and an asymmetric power structure. Not only do they find this out, but they realize we fed them the lie. We told them something we believed to be false. They're suckers because we made them suckers. My argument against this sucker theory hinges on the radical nature of Freire's critical pedagogy. From the dialectic, an inherent awareness facilitates ideas that surpass superficial understanding of any one subject. For justice, the dialectic between teacher and student raises the critical awareness Freire proposes, and not only works in concert with Rawlsian ideals of what justice should be, but furthers an understanding of it, accounting for the reality of how justice affects what is real and non-ideal. In this non-ideal world, the teacher and student push justice past what it might or should be, and develop a deeper understanding of justice as is. The deeper understanding pushes to atone for past injustices, to ensure real justice exists in the present so that it can prohibit future injustices, a full accounting of our human experience. In other words, Freire's critical pedagogy, contingent on our awareness of our humanity, only works if all involved see each other as ends in and of themselves rather than as a means to something else. Justice happens only after we see people, as human, whereas injustice uses people as a means towards something else. Once we recognize the humanity of one another, justice and education are indivisible and ultimately revolutionary, leaving one dangerous question in its wake. What are we willing to do to roll back the social and political norms that established our profoundly unjust society so that we can rebuild a profoundly just one? Thank you.